This is your host, Danny, and this is Word Power from English Plus Podcast. In today's Word Power, we're going to talk about Paul Bunyan and the Tall Tale. And in the context of our story today, we're going to learn 10 new words. The words are stimulate, proliferation, enhance, contrived, abound, recount, disparity, impair, impassive, and addendum. We're going to learn all these new words in context and in the context of a very interesting story about Paul Bunyan and the Tall Tale. But before we start, allow me first to welcome a new member of our patron family with a big thanks from the bottom of my heart, and on behalf of all our learning community, thank you very much. Javier Yusta became the latest patron of our learning community. A big thanks for helping us survive with you and with all the other patrons and the patrons to come. We are going to survive and we're going to become strong and independent. That's what I'm counting on. I'm counting on the support of the community. This is the only way we can survive, when we help each other. I will do my best from my end to bring you the best content I can ever give, and I'm always working on improving the content, on providing new solutions, new ways to learn, not only English. English, of course, is our main focus, but we are learning about many things as we can get our hands on and as time allows. So Javier and our other patrons, I can't thank you enough. And now back to our word power, Paul Bunyan and the Tall Tale. Let me remind you that, of course, we're going to learn about the story. We're going to learn about these words in context because, as I always tell you, that's very important to remember these words later on. You will remember the story and the meaning of the words will come to you. But that on its own is not enough. We need to practice. And to do that, I got you covered. I have interactive activities, a PDF downloadable worksheet. The worksheet includes the words from this episode and from the previous episode, so you get a chance to review the words from both episodes. That is also a good way to make those words permanent in your active vocabulary bank. You can find all these exercises and everything you need to practice what you're learning here today on my website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com. The link is in the description. Take the link and take your English with it to the next level. And don't forget, the second link will take you to my Patreon page. Join the family of our patrons. Support this learning community. Help me and help the learning community survive. And together we will become strong enough and one day even independent. I'm counting on you, and I'm counting on your generosity. If you can support, please do it. If you can't support, please spread the word. Tell other people who you think can support this learning community. If you really think that this learning community is worth saving, is worth supporting, tell other people about us. Because remember, I know I've been saying that a lot lately, but I'm just trying to save the learning community. I'm just trying to keep this project alive. We need more patrons by the end of the year. We need to get to at least 50 patrons to break even by the end of the year. And later on, we can aim to a number where we can become independent, fully independent. Can you imagine that? A fully independent learning community. And it is driven by you, is driven by your suggestions, what you want, what you love. And there's no telling what extra things I can add. That's what freedom feels like, when you can do whatever you want, when you know that your backbone is the community itself. And now let's start with our episode today, Word Power, Paul Bunyan and the Tall Tale. Paul Bunyan and the Tall Tale. There must be something about campfires that stimulates the storyteller in us. It was around frontier campfires that boredom and a sense of competition combined to create a proliferation of tall tales. Here were born such characters as Pecos Bill and John Henry. Even the actions of real human beings like Davy Crockett were enhanced with carefully contrived tales of unbelievable strength and courage. Perhaps the best-known character is Paul Bunyan, the logger. Stories of Paul Bunyan's size abound. One story claims that at birth, a huge boat served as Paul's cradle. The river gently rocked baby Paul to sleep. But when he rolled around in his bed, he created waves so large that people had to climb on their roofs to escape them. Another story recounts how Paul created the Grand Canyon by dragging his axe behind him as he walked across the plains. The disparity between Paul and his surroundings occasionally caused some problems. He had to be constantly reminded not to step on houses or put his foot on a mountain to tie his shoe. In most of the stories of Paul Bunyan, he is accompanied by his famous blue ox named Babe. Like Paul, Babe was huge. Her size was a great advantage. Paul Bunyan could clear an entire forest in one morning. Before he had Babe, however, his work was impaired because he had no way to carry away the trees he cut down. Babe could carry all the trees in a forest on her back. In one well-known tale, a serious water shortage occurred at a logging camp in North Dakota. Paul and Babe could not stand by impassively while men went thirsty. So Paul tied a big tank on Babe's back and set out to get water from the Great Lakes. On their return trip, Babe's hoofs made holes in the ground and the water from the tank spilled into them. According to the story, this is how Minnesota came to have so many lakes. One addendum to the story concerns an accident that supposedly occurred midway through the journey. Babe tripped, and all of the water spilled out of the tank on her back. This spill was the start of the Mississippi River. So, that is the meaning of tall tales. And of course, I'm not telling you that this is a real story. Obviously, it's not. But they're beautiful. They're beautiful stories. They're beautiful campfire stories. And to be honest, sometimes I really miss those campfire stories. Now everybody wants to talk about is just reality, and unfortunately not their own realities, but the reality of some famous people. But that is a story for another time. Let's focus on what we're here to do. We're here to learn 10 new words from the context of our story of Paul Bunyan and the Tall Tale. And these 10 words, I will remind you again, are stimulate, proliferation, enhance, contrive, abound, recount, disparity, impair, impassive, and addendum. Stay tuned. That's what we're going to do next. We're going to start with our very first word, stimulate. So let's take a look at this word, S-T-I-M-U-L-A-T-E, stimulate. Now let's take a look at how we use that in context. We said there must be something about campfires that stimulates the storyteller in us. Because, believe it or not, there is a storyteller in every single one of us. Maybe some of us are great storytellers, maybe some of us are not that good, but we all have stories to tell. No matter how well or badly we tell them, but we have the storyteller in us. What stimulates the storyteller? Now, when we talk about stimulate something, to stimulate something means to encourage it to begin or develop further, to inspire it, to prompt it, to galvanize it. That is the meaning of stimulate. There must be something about campfires that stimulates the storyteller in us, that encourages the storyteller in us to show or develop. That's the meaning of stimulate. And that is our very first word. Now let's move on to the next word, proliferation. P-R-O-L-I-F-E-R-A-T-I-O-N. Proliferation. Now let's see how we use this word in context. We said it was around frontier campfires that boredom and a sense of competition combined to create a proliferation of tall tales. When we talk about proliferation, do you think we are talking about something that happened in small numbers or something that is not significant? We're talking about something that happened in scarcity? Not at all. It's just the opposite. Proliferation means rapid growth or increase in number. That is exactly what it means. We're talking about something that happens in great numbers, especially we're talking about the growth of something like that. So, create a proliferation of tall tales, a lot of tall tales. There was a rapid growth or increase in the number of tall tales told around campfires. So, that is our word, proliferation. What about our next word, enhance? E-N-H-A-N-C-E. Let's take a look at how we use that in context. We said, even the actions of real human beings like Davy Crockett were enhanced with carefully contrived tales of unbelievable strength and courage. What does that mean? When we talk about something that was enhanced, here we're talking about the actions of real human beings. Davy Crockett was a real human being, but even the actions of real human beings like Davy Crockett were enhanced. To enhance something means to improve its value, quality, or attractiveness. Maybe by exaggerating sometimes. Especially here in the context of Davy Crockett, the stories of Davy Crockett, of course, they were exaggerated. But here, that's the word enhance. You are making them better. You're improving them. You are improving their value, their quality, or attractiveness. Because remember, when you want to tell a story, you will need the story to be attractive. Well, of course, in modern storytelling, we tend to be more realistic. But that doesn't mean that people don't exaggerate in their stories anymore, even writers, even famous writers, because exaggeration is the heart of writing. I mean, some people still like reading stories about magic and fantasy, science fiction, and even other realistic stories. If they are told exactly as they would happen in real life, they would be boring. You will need to enhance the story, to add something to the story to improve its value, quality, attractiveness. That is the meaning of enhance. And within the same sentence, we have another word, and that is contrived. Let me read the context to you again. Even the actions of real human beings like Davy Crockett were enhanced with carefully contrived tales of unbelievable strength and courage. Contrived tales. When we talk about contrived tales, but first let me tell you how this word is spelled. Contrived, C-O-N-T-R-I-V-E-D. Contrived. Now, if you say that something someone says or does is contrived, you think it is false and deliberate. It is not false by mistake. Remember, it's false and deliberate. It happened on purpose. And that is to say, it is false and deliberate rather than natural and not planned. And nowadays, when we talk about contrived stories or contrived plot of a movie or a story you're reading, a novel or something, you're actually criticizing the novel or the movie because the flow of action or the flow of events is not natural. It is unbelievable. It doesn't make any sense. You can see that the writer is kind of forcing the action to go in a certain direction that doesn't make any sense. And that happens, to be honest, even in modern movies, even in many modern books. You can see that the writer sometimes steps in the story, or in the case of movies, sometimes even directors do that. They step in the story and they force the action to go to a certain direction, which doesn't make any sense. They're kind of forcing the action instead of making it flow naturally. Even if you're writing the story, but you need to make the story or make the events flow naturally in a way that will lead eventually to wherever you want to lead them. If you can't do that, if you kind of force the action and you make those things, because remember, these things are deliberate, we can say that this is a contrived tale or contrived plot. So remember, again, if you say that something someone says or does is contrived, you think it is false and deliberate rather than natural and not planned. And now for our next word, abound. A-B-O-U-N-D. We had this word when we were talking about stories of Paul Bunyan. Stories of Paul Bunyan's size abound. Now here, you might say abound, what is that? Is that an adverb, an adjective, a noun, a what? It's a verb actually. And we can say something abounds or things abound. If things abound or if a place abounds with things, that means there are very large numbers of them. Very large numbers of those things, whatever they are. In our case here, in our context here, we're talking about stories of Paul Bunyan's size. Because remember, the very special thing about Paul Bunyan was his size. He was huge, together with his blue ox babe. But stories of Paul Bunyan's size abound. They became very large in number. They were numerous. They were a lot of them. You can use this word instead. I will have to say this word is a little bit formal, but remember, it is important to learn some formal words. It is important because sometimes you will need to use those big words, formal words. Not always use just the words you know. It's always good to know other words you can add to your writing, whether in an academic context or in business or in other places where you really want to be formal. It's up to you. But remember, learning these words can be useful. And if you never want to use these words, it's up to you, but at least you need to understand them, right? So that is our word abound. These were the first 5 words for today: stimulate, proliferation, enhance, contrived, and abound. We still have 5 more to go. Don't go away. That's coming next.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Looking to enhance your English skills while exploring a world of knowledge? then English Plus Podcast website is just for you. Dive into diverse topics ranging from science to literature, history to business, and myths to modern insights. Each episode from our podcast or article from our magazine is a journey of learning and discovery, designed to not only improve your language skills, but also broaden your understanding of the world. Join us at English Plus Podcast, where language meets limitless learning. Tune in today and take your English to the next level. Visit EnglishPlusPodcast.com to start your journey. English Plus Podcast, language, learning, enlightenment. Never stop learning with English Plus. So let's continue with the next word, recount. R-E-C-O-U-N-T, recount. Let's see how we use that in context. We said another story recounts how Paul created the Grand Canyon by dragging his axe behind him as he walked across the plains. What does that mean when we recount something? When another story recounts how Paul did this or did that? If you recount a story or event, you tell or describe the story to people, usually in great details. Because to recount something is just like the job of a storyteller. A storyteller recounts stories, recounts events, and tells those events to people. So that is the meaning of recount, just like telling a story. And remember, usually in great detail. So that was our word recount. What about our next word, disparity? D-I-S-P-A-R-I-T-Y. Disparity. What does that mean? Before we know what it means, let's take a look at how we use that in context. We said the disparity between Paul and his surroundings occasionally caused some problems. Because if you think about it, I know Paul Bunyan is not real, but if you think about the story, Paul Bunyan was so different from the surroundings. All the people around him were so small. The houses were too small. Everything was too small if you compare it to Paul Bunyan's size. So the disparity between Paul and his surroundings occasionally caused some problems. What does it mean when we talk about disparity? We're talking about the difference. If there is a disparity between two or more things, there is a noticeable difference between them. And here, obviously, in our context, we're talking about size, but it can be about anything else. That is what we say the disparity, like the difference, the gap, the distinction. So that was disparity. Let's move on to talk about our next word, impair. I-M-P-A-I-R, impair. Let's take a look at how we use that in context. We said talking about Paul, of course, before Paul had Babe, however, his work was impaired because he had no way to carry away the trees he cut down. So here, when we talk about something impair here as a verb, if something impairs something, such as an ability or the way something works, it damages it or makes it worse. That means like to worsen something, to damage something. Now here when we talk about damage, it doesn't have to be real damage. Well, usually yes, something is impaired, there is damage. But sometimes it's not about real damage, especially like the context here. We can talk about here reduction in ability or something. His ability was impaired, his work was impaired. Paul Bunyan's work was impaired because he had no way to carry all those trees he cut down. When Babe came along, that problem was solved. He could carry all the trees he wanted using Babe's strong back. So, that is a word, impair. Now for our next word, impassive. I-M-P-A-S-S-I-V-E. Let's take a look at how we use that in context. Paul and Babe could not stand by impassively while men went thirsty. So Paul tied a big tank on Babe's back and set out to get water from the Great Lakes. Now, here, when you stand impassively, what does it mean impassive? If you see something that happens in front of you, and this thing is sad or happy, or it actually causes you to have some kind of emotion, to react emotionally in a way. If you are impassive, that means you do not react. If someone is impassive, or their face is impassive, like sometimes what we call poker face, they are not showing any emotion. So it can be just a trick. You're not showing your emotion. It can be just a way that you're kind of controlling your emotions. Or sometimes, and that is actually a bad thing, you don't have emotions at all. I'm not saying you, someone doesn't have emotions at all. It's not just they're not showing their emotions, they are unemotional. They're unmoved, emotionless. That is the meaning of impassive. But of course, in the context we said, Paul and Babe could not stand by impassively. Men went thirsty. They had to do something. They could not just sit around, do nothing, and pretend nothing was happening. Be that kind of unemotional or impassive. All right, so that is our word. And that brings me to the very last word of this episode, and that is addendum. A-D-D-E-N-D-U-M. Well, I know this is a formal word, but again, it is used a lot in academic contexts, in business contexts, in other contexts, sometimes in legal contexts as well. But we have this word, and it's very simple. It might look like a big word and stuff like that, but it's very simple. Let's see how we use it in context first. One addendum to the story concerns an accident that supposedly occurred midway through the journey. Here we're talking about when Paul Bunyan and Babe were transporting water from the Great Lakes to those thirsty men, and a lot of things happened. A lot of rivers came to be because of this journey. But anyway, one addendum, one addition. Simply, an addendum is an additional section at the end of a book or a document. Well, that is originally what we use it for, but it can simply mean addition or supplement. Something extra, something that was added later. The book was over. The story of this legendary journey from the Great Lakes to those men was told at a time, but later some details and some other stories were added. So maybe it was not the original tale. The original tale did not have all these details in it, but some details were added later. An addendum. One addendum. One of these addendums was the story of the Mississippi River, as we learned from the story. So here, our word addendum, simply addition, especially when it happens after the fact. If you think about a book, it's very clear because you finish writing a book and then after you publish the book, you think of an addendum, something to add to the book. Maybe because there was something you didn't mention and you want to mention now, or you're just updating the book, whatever. But that is the addendum, that is the word, and that is our very last word for today's episode. Let me tell you folks, if you really want to master these words, if you really want to make the most of our word power episodes and word power series, just take the link you can find in the description of the episode. Go to my website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com. You will find all the practice you need. A PDF downloadable worksheet. You can keep it for later. Do some crossword puzzles, word searches, and other fun activities to review these words and keep these words and actually make them permanent in your active vocabulary bank. Because the whole point is to use these words. Of course, it's great to understand the meaning of these words, and that is something on its own. But it is a step further. It's the real step actually is to use these words. And to be able to use these words, you will have to remember how they were used in context in the first place. And I can help you with that. There are those interactive activities that can cement the information you just learned. And then there is the PDF downloadable worksheet. Well, actually, I created both types because I know some people like paper more. So there is the PDF, and I know that some people don't like paper, don't like to download and print stuff. So there are the interactive activities on the website. You don't need to print anything if you don't like that. But anyway, everything you need to practice. And my advice for practice is that you just go right now and practice 1 or 2 exercises. Do 1 or 2 exercises, practice now. Then come back tomorrow or the day after tomorrow. Then come back in a week, then in 2 weeks, then in a month. And every time you come back, you can do 1 or 2 exercises. That's why I have a lot of exercises. Not because I want you to do them all in one day or in one sitting. That is not very useful, to be honest. I want you to do them over time because that is very important for you not to forget these words. And when you come back, maybe you don't want to do the same thing, especially if it is on paper. I mean, you don't want to erase the old stuff. You don't need to. We have enough exercises for as many rounds of practice as you need. And if you need more, just tell me, I will include more. That's not a problem. So with that being said, I hope you will go now and take this link you can find in the description of the episode and take your English with it to the next level. Don't forget about the second link that will take you to my Patreon page, and there you can support me, support this learning community we have, make it strong, help it survive, grow, and thrive. I will do everything I can from my end, and if you help me from your end, that will be the perfect learning community that is driven only by the community, not by somebody else who wants to advertise something nobody cares about, and then we get the money. I'm not going to include advertisements ever. But again, I'm counting on your help. Just like Javier, our latest patron, you can become like Javier and the other 15 patrons we have. We need to reach 50 patrons by the end of the year. We can do that. We still have time. We can survive if we help each other. With that being said, let me thank you very much for listening to another episode from English Plus Podcast. This is your host, Danny. I will see you next time.